Millionaire invited Black Janitor as a joke, but she showed up like a diva, and everyone was in absolute shock. There are moments in life when a simple invitation can change everything. This is the story of Grace, a woman who for 15 years was treated as invisible, until the night she proved she had been watching and planning all along. A story that will make you question everything you think about power, humiliation, and revenge. The city's most exclusive gala was being organized. Each invitation cost more than an average person's annual salary. It was the kind of event where only the richest and most powerful were welcome, where every glass of champagne was worth more than an entire electricity bill. But on this particular night, something completely unexpected was about to happen. Marcus Miller, heir to one of the city's largest fortunes, was planning his 40th birthday party. Known for his cruelty disguised as charm, Marcus always found ways to humiliate those he considered inferior. And it was in this moment of supreme arrogance that he had an idea that would change his life forever. Sitting in his luxurious office, surrounded by his equally cruel friends, Thomas Bennett, William Clark, and Michael Roberts, Marcus watched Grace silently cleaning in the background. She was the janitor who had been taking care of Miller and Associates' offices for 15 years. To them, she was just another object in the room, useful, silent, and completely disposable. It was then that Marcus had his perverse idea. Drunk with power and wanting to impress his friends, he decided his party needed extra entertainment. The idea was simple and cruel. Invite Grace to the gala, not to honor her, but to expose her to ridicule. They would make a bet on how long it would take her to realize she didn't belong there and leave humiliated. "Let's see if our Grace has the courage to show up among the elite," Marcus laughed, holding the golden invitation with a malicious grin. "It'll be the show of the night." The other men laughed, imagining a simple, black, and poor woman trying to fit into an environment where not even the waiters were treated with respect. But what they didn't know was that Grace wasn't exactly who they thought she was. For all those 15 years, while cleaning the offices in the dead of night, she had been much more than just a simple janitor. Like a silent shadow, she witnessed conspiracies, collected crumpled papers with information worth millions, listened to conversations forgotten on recorders, and witnessed traces of corporate betrayals. Grace knew exactly who was stealing from the company. She knew every lie told to partners. She knew about the extramarital affairs, the dirty deals, every rotten secret of those men. Thomas Miller left confidential documents scattered on the table as if she were blind. James Thompson recorded his illegal calls and forgot to delete them as if she were deaf. Robert Davis kept drugs in the safe he left ajar as if she were an idiot. But her social invisibility made her the safest vault in the world. After all, who would imagine that a janitor could be a witness to something important? To those powerful men, Grace was transparent, non-existent, irrelevant. And it was precisely this underestimation that would become their ruin. Marcus approached Grace with the golden invitation in hand, a cruel smile plastered on his face. "Grace," he said with false gentleness, "I'm organizing a small party, and I'd really like you to attend. It's a formal event, so you'll need to dress appropriately." He handed her the invitation, expecting her to refuse or, even better, to not understand the humiliation being planned. But Grace simply took the invitation, read it calmly, and replied with a serenity that made Marcus slightly uncomfortable. "Thank you very much for the invitation, Mr. Miller. It will be a pleasure to attend your party. I accept." At that moment, Marcus felt a strange shiver run down his spine. Something in her tone of voice, in the way she held the invitation, in the way her eyes sparkled for a second, made him wonder if he had made a mistake. But it was too late. The invitation had been accepted, and their fate was sealed. The night of the party arrived. The hall was filled with the city's elite, all dressed in their finest clothes, showing off their most expensive jewelry, talking about their millionaire businesses. Marcus and his friends were eager to see Grace arrive humble and out of place, ready to be ridiculed. But when the doors of the hall opened and Grace appeared, an absolute silence fell over the room. She was no longer the humble janitor they knew. Grace emerged wearing an elegant navy blue ball gown that enhanced her natural beauty, with a proud and confident posture that radiated power and sophistication. She circulated through the hall, greeting guests with surprising eloquence. She spoke about art with an expert's knowledge, discussed international politics with authority, demonstrated knowledge of French wines that impressed even the sommeliers present. She quoted Shakespeare as if she were a literature professor and discussed the stock market like a seasoned economist. The guests were fascinated by this mysterious woman who knew so much about so many subjects. But the real shock came when Grace began to approach Marcus and his friends, subtly revealing that she knew exactly who they were behind their social masks. "Thomas," she said with an enigmatic smile, "how is your wife? Has she still not discovered your late-night visits to your secretary's office?" The man paled instantly, his eyes widening in terror. "And William," Grace continued calmly, "how are things going with those fictitious City Hall contracts? Has the investigation department not knocked on your door yet?" One by one, Grace revealed that she knew the most intimate and dangerous secrets of every man present. She knew about the frauds, about the extramarital affairs, about the illegal dealings, about every rotten thing they hid behind their expensive suits and fake smiles. Marcus began to feel panic taking over his body. How did this woman know all this? How had a simple janitor discovered secrets that even his lawyers didn't know? He had to do something. He had to regain control of the situation. It was then that Marcus, desperate to regain his authority, made the fatal mistake. In the middle of the hall, in front of all the guests, he shouted, "Everyone, I want you to meet our dear disguised janitor. Grace has been cleaning our offices for years, and we decided to invite her to our little party as a joke. Isn't it adorable to see how she's trying to pass herself off as one of us?" The silence that followed was deafening. All eyes turned to Grace, expecting to see her crumble in humiliation. But what happened was exactly the opposite. Grace smiled, a calm and powerful smile that sent chills down Marcus's spine. "Thank you very much, Marcus," she said in a voice that echoed throughout the hall. "Thank you for giving me the opportunity to properly introduce myself to my colleagues. Because that's what you are to me now, colleagues." And then Grace dropped the bomb that would destroy everything. She wasn't just a janitor. She had graduated from Harvard Business School with a degree in administration, had a master's in corporate law from Columbia, and had spent the last 15 years not cleaning out of necessity, but out of strategy. "You thought I was invisible," Grace said, her voice growing in power and authority. "And that's exactly what made me invincible. All these years, while you treated me as a disposable object, I was collecting evidence, photographing documents, recording conversations, gathering enough material to bring down this entire company and send all of you to prison." The revelation hit the hall like lightning. Guests began to murmur among themselves. Some tried to discreetly back away. Others were paralyzed by shock. Marcus felt his legs weaken, as if the ground were collapsing beneath him. But Grace wasn't finished. "All these years," she continued, "I was also quietly buying shares in this company. I used my savings, the inheritance my parents left me, every penny I could save. And this morning, before coming to this party, I officially became the majority shareholder of Miller and Associates." The impact of this revelation was devastating. Thomas Bennett simply fainted, falling to the marble floor with a dull thud. William Clark began to cry like a child, his tears staining his expensive silk tie. Michael Roberts tried to approach Grace, stammering pleas for forgiveness, but she ignored him completely. Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. The woman he had invited as a joke, whom he had treated like trash for 15 years, was now his boss. She controlled his destiny, his family's company, everything he knew as reality. "Starting Monday," Grace said with chilling calm, "I will be the company's new CEO. You can continue working for me if I decide you deserve a second chance, or you can look for employment elsewhere. But now I decide your future." Grace calmly placed some documents in her designer purse, documents that contained enough evidence to destroy the lives of every man present in that hall. She had planned everything meticulously, waited patiently for the right moment, turning years of humiliation into absolute power. "Thank you for the invitation, Marcus," she finally said, walking towards the exit with the elegance of a queen. It was exactly the opportunity one had been waiting for 15 years. The invisible janitor had become the most powerful woman in the room, and everyone who had laughed at her now depended on her mercy. The following Monday, Grace sat for the first time in the presidential chair that had once belonged to Marcus. The office she used to clean in the dead of night was now hers. The company that had treated her as a disposable object was now under her command, and the men who had humiliated her now worked for her if she decided to keep them employed. This story teaches us something profound about the power of patience, observation, and preparation. How many extraordinary people go unnoticed in our lives because we can't see beyond the uniforms they wear, the jobs they do, the social position they occupy? How many times do we underestimate someone because our arrogance blinds us to the true nature of people? Grace transformed her social invisibility into the greatest strategic advantage possible. She proved that sometimes those who are considered last can become first, and that true strength comes not from the position we hold, but from the dignity with which we face our silent battles. The humiliation that should have been hers became the ruin of those who tried to destroy her. And in the end, the woman who was invited as a joke had the last laugh. But the true lesson of this story goes far beyond revenge or poetic justice. Grace not only gained power, she completely redefined the concept of strength. For 15 years, she carried the weight of social invisibility, silent discrimination, and contempt disguised as indifference. Every day she entered that office, she saw those men treating her as if she were a ghost, as if her existence had no value. Imagine the inner strength required to endure this day after day, year after year, without ever revealing her true intellectual capacity, her academic background, her meticulously crafted plans. Grace transformed every humiliation into fuel for her strategy. Every look of disdain became another reason to continue collecting evidence. Every cruel joke made behind her back strengthened her determination to one day completely reverse that power dynamic. What makes this story even more impactful is realizing how many details Grace had observed during all those years of silence. She knew the schedules of each executive, knew when they arrived drunk at the office, witnessed calls where they confessed crimes, saw documents being forged, witnessed bribes being negotiated. Her position as a night janitor gave her access to information that even the most experienced investigators could not obtain. And all this time, Marcus and his friends lived in a bubble of arrogance, completely oblivious to the fact that they were being watched, studied, cataloged. They believed so much in their own superiority that they never imagined that someone they considered inferior could pose a real threat. This blindness caused by prejudice and arrogance was exactly what allowed Grace to execute her plan with absolute perfection. Grace's transformation on the night of the party was not just physical or behavioral. It was the revelation of who she always was beneath the mask society forced her to wear. She didn't become powerful that night. She simply stopped hiding her power. And when she finally revealed herself, the impact was so devastating precisely because no one was prepared to discover that they had completely underestimated that woman. This story resonates deeply because all of us, at some point, have felt invisible, underestimated, or undervalued. We have all experienced the pain of being judged by appearance, by profession, by social status, by skin color. Grace represents the hope that one day our true strength will be recognized, that our patience will be rewarded, that those who humiliated us will face the consequences of their actions. But it also makes us reflect on how many times we ourselves have been like Marcus and his friends. How many times have we looked at someone and made judgments based only on the surface? How many extraordinary people have we overlooked because we couldn't see beyond social labels? Grace's story is a mirror that reflects not only the cruelty of others, but also our own prejudices and limitations. In the end, when Grace took control of the company, she not only gained justice for herself. She set a precedent, showed that it is possible to transform invisibility into an advantage, that patience can be more powerful than aggression, that strategic silence can be more effective than desperate cries for attention. The presidential chair where Grace finally sat was not just a symbol of corporate power. It was the throne conquered through years of sacrifice, planning, and unwavering inner strength. And when she looked out the window of that office, she knew, so well, she didn't just see the city outside. She saw a world of possibilities finally opening up for someone who always deserved to be there, but who had to prove her worth in the most difficult way possible. In the days that followed the party, the consequences of Grace's revelations spread like ripples in a pond. Marcus had to explain to his family how he had lost control of the century-old company. Thomas Bennett was hospitalized with a nervous breakdown when he discovered that Grace had recordings of his illegal dealings. William Clark tried to flee the city, but was intercepted at the airport when authorities received an anonymous package with evidence of his tax crimes. The local press couldn't believe the story. A janitor who turned out to be a brilliant strategist, a woman who transformed 15 years of invisibility into the perfect revenge. Newspapers called it the silent coup, others the rise of the invisible janitor. But Grace didn't give interviews, didn't seek the spotlight. She simply continued working, now from her own office, implementing changes that made the company more ethical and prosperous than it had ever been. And every time Grace walked through the corridors she had once cleaned in the lonely nights, she remembered every humiliation, every look of disdain, every moment she was treated as if she didn't exist. But now those memories brought no pain. They brought the certainty that she had chosen the right path, that her patience had been rewarded, that sometimes justice takes time, but always comes to those who know how to wait for the perfect moment. 6 months after the party, Grace received a desperate letter from Marcus. He had lost everything: the company, the mansion, the respect of society. He begged for forgiveness, pleaded for a second chance, promised he had learned his lesson. Grace read the letter once and put it in a drawer, along with all the other evidence she had collected over the years. Not out of cruelty, but because some lessons can only be learned through the complete consequences of our actions. Grace's story became a legend in the city. Other women in similar positions began to be inspired by her courage. Cleaning staff, secretaries, attendants, all those who were treated as invisible began to realize they had more power than they imagined. Not the power of revenge, but the power of observation, patience, and preparation. And Grace? She continued to be exactly who she always was, a woman of exceptional strength who simply stopped hiding that strength from the world. Today, when young professionals visit the Miller & Associates company, now rebranded as Grace & Associates, they see an elegant portrait of the CEO in the entrance hall. But few know the full story behind those serene and determined eyes. Few imagine that this woman spent years being treated as a shadow before revealing herself as light. Grace transformed not only her own life, but redefined what it means to be powerful. She proved that true power does not come from golden cradles or famous surnames, but from the ability to transform adversity into strategy, silence into strength, invisibility into absolute advantage. 1 year after that memorable night, Grace decided to do something no one expected. She created a scholarship program for cleaning and general service employees from across the city. Women like her, who worked in the shadows, now had the opportunity to study administration, law, accounting. Grace knew there were hundreds of other invisible women with extraordinary potential hidden behind simple uniforms and jobs undervalued by society. The program was called Silent Strength and became a national phenomenon. Companies across the country began to pay more attention to their employees who were previously ignored. Stories emerge of janitors who revealed themselves to be polyglots, of gardeners with engineering degrees, of doormen who were talented artists. Grace had opened a door that allowed the world to see what had always been there, but remained invisible. During the program's graduation ceremonies, Grace always made sure to be present. In the joyful tears of those women, she saw the reflection of her own journey. Every diploma handed out was a victory against prejudice. Every dream realized was proof that social invisibility does not define human potential. Marcus, for his part, never fully recovered. He found a job as a salesperson in a small shop, far from the spotlight that was once his. Sometimes, when he saw news of Grace's success on television, he wondered how he could have been so blind as to not perceive the greatness of the woman he interacted with daily. Sometimes on the quietest nights, when the building is empty and she works late, Grace still walks through the same corridors she once cleaned. But now she smiles, knowing that every step on that marble floor echoes with the sound of justice finally achieved. If this story moved you, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and share the message.